Good evening, Susan. Greetings, everyone. I'm absolutely delighted to be working with you this evening on ethnic consumption of lamb products. This is something about which I'm very passionate. I love my family farm. I love the opportunities that I've had to work with the ethnic community as far as marketing items. At this juncture, if we could get some feedback from those of you that are listening to make sure that audio is coming through clear, we would appreciate it as we get started. As Susan mentioned, we will be working together. I'll be doing the audio portion and allowing her to know when we need to advance slides. Excellent. I really appreciate that feedback. That helps a great deal. Thank you. As we get started here, first of all, I do want to recognize Susan's presentation from last week was excellent as far as presenting a lot of the topics that are considerations in working with what we often know as ethnic communities. So Susan, would you go ahead and take us to the next slide at this juncture? As Susan was discussing some of those different components that shape what we know as ethnic markets, she provided some really good definitions as far as cultural traditions, religious components, other things of that nature that factor into the consideration of what makes a quote-unquote ethnic market. Some of the questions that you can see on the screen right now are items that I'd like you to consider as we're discussing these topics. We're all very passionate about our farms, but we should be considering how we actually market our products to be able to reach our consumers. And it doesn't matter whether your consumer is someone that you sell flowers to at a local farm market, or whether your consumer is someone originally from Senegal and West Africa who is purchasing a lamb from you. You need to know who that consumer is, and you need to be able to target them. In addition, last week, Susan also brought up a lot of the pros and cons that go along with shaping your markets toward those ethnic consumers. I'm optimistic that this evening, as I tell you some stories about my own experiences, that you can factor into what some of those considerations are as you shape your own business plan to be able to reach those communities. There are some challenges that go along with it, but as with any type of market, if you structure your business correctly, you can overcome most of those items. Susan will go ahead and move on to the next slide at this point, and I'll introduce myself a little bit more so you know exactly what my background is and how I was able to really work with what we know as the ethnic communities. I grew up on a very traditional livestock and grain farm in central Ohio, a small town called Canal Winchester. My grandfather, as I was growing up, managed the farm. We raised a lot of wheat, soybeans, corn. His passion, however, was really in raising sheep. His parents had ranched sheep in Wyoming, and so growing up, the sheep were the big focus of our farm. Again, as I said, it was a very conventional farm at that time. My mother was a school teacher. I went to university at the University of Richmond. I ended up studying world religions simply because I had an interest in world cultures. I never realized that my undergraduate studies in world religions and then my graduate studies in economics education would someday play into actually being able to sell sheep and goats to the ethnic community on my family farm. So being able to do that was an amazing opportunity for me. But that being said, after getting out of university, I initially anticipated that I would always have a job off the farm, basically to be able to supplement my animals. I loved my sheep, loved the goats. Basically, my goats were like a goat habit that I had to subsidize, but I loved raising them. As our community was changing, my family recognized that we really wanted to keep our farm going. Time was evolving, farming was evolving, but we had a focus on keeping the farm functional, keeping it intact, and keeping it in our family. So we began looking at a value-added approach to our sheep and goats. My mother was raising what had been her father's sheep herd, and as I mentioned, I always had a little herd of goats, so we did have these animals on the farm, and we're trying to find a way to position them to make the farm better for the future. Susan will move on then to the next slide. Our local community was changing rapidly in the 1990s. A lot of the local farms that were there as I was growing up were now becoming subdivisions. It was becoming much more difficult to farm in the same way that my grandfather did in the 1950s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. Things were rapidly changing in our community. And in effect, our small town of Canal Winchester was becoming another suburb of the metropolitan area of Columbus. But along with that change, we also saw a great deal of change in the Columbus metropolitan area. Likewise, starting in the 1990s, there was a great deal of Somali immigrants who were coming to the Columbus area. Along with the Somali immigrants, there were also numerous individuals from North Africa, West Africa, many Hispanic people, Southeast Asian community. Although these individuals had traveled great distances to come to Columbus, they were still looking for their traditional sources of protein, typically lamb and goat. They were looking for items that we were raising on our farm. So this led my family to start discussing how we can actually structure a business venture to be able to tap into this new community and also to be able to assist our farm. Susan, we'll move on to the next slide because I would like to focus on some of the considerations that we had as we were discussing a niche market to be able to position our product. We knew the market was there. We literally had people coming up our driveway, individuals who were from many countries around the world. They were coming out into the rural area looking for sheep farms, looking for goat farms, trying to find individuals that had the products that they enjoyed eating. We were fortunate enough to be in the position where we were already raising sheep and goats. But along with that, we wanted to make sure that our family farm was operational and profitable. We didn't want it to be just a hobby farm. We wanted to keep the farm functioning. Along with this, as a family, we were committed that we were going to make a new business venture a success. This was something that we tried to tap into numerous resources to make sure that we were facing this prudently. This was going to be a business venture, and we wanted to make sure that we met all the considerations that went around it. That niche marketing concept really applies to anything that you want to approach as a farm business. Make sure you understand your consumer, make sure you're targeting it in the proper way, and make sure you understand any regulations that go along with your business venture. Susan, we'll move on to the next slide. In late 2004, my family opened up Blystone Farm Butcher Shop. Originally, it was just a slaughterhouse component on our farm. Since then, we have expanded it to actually have a retail case out front to be able to meet even more the needs of not only the ethnic community, but also the local community. But when we first opened up, it was right on our farm. As you see that picture on the screen there, in the center is the main barn, and then off to the right is the slaughterhouse. So it is right there. It is not too far from our house. We were opening up our home, inviting people from the ethnic community in to be able to access the lamb and goat. As we were developing this business, there were numerous entities with which we worked to make sure that we were meeting all regulations. First of all, Ohio Revised Code. Susan touched last week on the fact that it's very important to understand the regulations that go along with legal and illegal slaughter. Never put yourself in a situation where you're going to suffer a penalty because of an illegal slaughter decision. Thus, always take time to research what is legitimate for your state. We also worked a great deal with the Ohio Department of Agriculture. We're fortunate that in Ohio we have state-inspected slaughter. This allows for a great deal of responsiveness because with our State Department of Agriculture, the office is located about 20 minutes away. We're able to work closely with the inspectors to make sure that we're meeting all needs to ensure a quality product for our consumers. We also worked a great deal with our county EPA. It was a rather unique situation because, again, we do reside in a metropolitan county. Thus, we needed to make sure that we were meeting all regulations associated with a unique business creation within that area. Ohio State University Extension was amazing as we were developing this. They provided us with a lot of ideas as far as marketing of our farm business, production of sheep and goats, and especially at the Ohio State University Meat Lab, we were able to actually work hands-on to see how the product could be processed to meet our consumers' needs. We also attended a program at Ohio State University called Lamb 509. That program allowed my mother, my stepfather, and myself to actually work hands-on in the meat lab to be able to butcher a lamb and understand more about the slaughter process. I highly recommend educational components such as Lamb 509 because they add so many opportunities for a farmer to better understand the animal that they raise, and if you're looking to make it into a business, to better understand what the options are along with that. Likewise, getting involved in a state association that is focused on sheep, goats, the type of product which you want to promote, whatever it may be, is going to be a huge asset. That allows you to network, to understand the product better, and to be able to position yourself to further your farm. Susan will go ahead and move on to the next slide. Now, from my experiences in working with the ethnic community, there were some things that were very consistent as far as what the consumers were looking for. I was privileged to have conversations with individuals from all over the world who had had a wide variety of experiences. I always enjoy engaging individuals that come from different cultures. As aforementioned, that was in my undergraduate studies because I really am fascinated by the religious component, the cultural component, and I love meeting people. So invariably I'd have wonderful conversations with people that I would see on a regular basis. Just as it's very typical in the American community that we have a grocery store of choice that we visit on a regular basis, Likewise, we would see a lot of our customers every week, every other week, and get to know them a great deal. In these conversations, it became clear to me that there were certain things that were very important to our consumers. Not only, though, can you factor this into the ethnic community, but it does factor into any customer experience working on a farm. First of all, a fresh product. This was what I heard over and over. We were not the cheapest option around. The individuals who were coming to our farm to purchase an animal wanted it to be fresh. They were deciding to spend a little bit more to be able to get that fresh product. Beyond that, they also wanted to pick their own animal. Very traditional to many of these cultures is the fact that usually the man will go and select the animal that will be slaughtered to be able to feed the family. This is something that is important to them traditionally, and they enjoy that opportunity to select the animal that is going to feed their family. In addition, having the kill done in a ritual manner is very important for religious needs. Whether it is kosher or halal, specific to the Jewish community or specific to the Muslim community, or whether it is the cultural tradition, not a religious prohibition, but rather a cultural tradition of the Ethiopian community, they want to make sure that it is killed in a manner that meets their needs. That's not something that can always be regulated at a lot of large-scale grocery stores, but being on a small farm business, the individuals could pick their animal, and because they knew our employees, know that it was going to be processed in the manner in which they wished. The ability to take home their favorite parts of the animal was huge at our business. As Americans, we typically don't think of the goat stomach or the sheep intestines as being the most delicious part, but keep in mind that these traditions vary from culture to culture. So for our customers, they were seeking the opportunity to make sure that they were able to enjoy their favorite parts of the animal. Other things that I would hear in conversations, they really stressed that we had a clean processing location. They liked knowing that their meat was being processed in a place that was clean, that they had a pleasant customer experience, they knew the family that owned the farm, they knew those of us that worked there, and also just that opportunity to visit a farm. Many of our customers came from farm communities, even though they were now working in blue-collar jobs or even white-collar jobs at universities, research, things of that nature. They liked being able to get out to a farm and have that opportunity. I hope this underscores that no matter what you are producing, make sure you talk to your consumer. Find out what it is that they are seeking. Understand that market that you're trying to tap into. Get to know your customer. They are glad to tell you what it is they like and what they don't like. Just engage them in that conversation. Susan, we'll move on from here. Sharing some stories with you from our slaughterhouse. In this picture, you will see me with Mohammed. Mohammed has been a longtime employee at Blystone Farm. Wonderful individual. If you take a look at the table, we're packaging products there that were very typical to our business, but not especially to other businesses. There you can see a sheep stomach, the lamb's head that's been cut up to make soup. These are items that are very traditional for many of our customers to consume. Not necessarily things that you would buy at Giant Eagle or Kroger, but we were able to provide those to our customers, and we knew that was important to them. Some things I'd like you to think about as I tell you some more stories about my family's business. First of all, understand that ritual slaughter does have very specific requirements. For example, with kosher kills, the rabbi traditionally needs to be on site to make sure that it is performed correctly. Halal kills in the Muslim community are slightly different. Halal is a word that means acceptable. The opposite is haram, which means forbidden. Halal can apply to the way you dress, the way you bank, the way you process your meat. So it simply needs to meet those requirements. Traditionally in the Quran, it is mandated that an animal must be slaughtered by an adult male Muslim facing toward Mecca. Muslims, however, if they are not able to meet that need, will consume something that is kosher or that is slaughtered by a Christian because they do recognize both the Jewish and the Christian community as being believers in one God, and therefore they will consume those products. Their preference, however, is most definitely for something that has been slaughtered in a halal method. And understand that these cultural traditions will dictate the slaughter, the processing, as well as the manner in which it is butchered for cooking, because there may be very unique techniques that are utilized to cook these meat products. Also, something I would like you to consider is that communication styles and purchasing protocols do vary around the world. Things that seem odd in the American community could be very traditional to the communities with which you are working with the ethnic consumers. And Susan, we'll move on to our next slide here. In the picture that is focused there, that's one that my friends often joke should be placed on the website awkwardfamilyphotos.com. It's not often that you get to see a picture like that of a slaughterhouse that is working, but that was a typical day in our slaughterhouse during a holiday season. Our staff is largely our family. My brother works there full-time, my folks, my cousin, but we do have a lot of part-time help from the ethnic community. We are inspected by the Ohio Department of Agriculture, as I mentioned previously, and we do purchase livestock from farmers throughout Ohio and the Midwest. Our farm was the first in the state to be licensed for custom, on-farm ritual slaughter. What this means is that the custom component indicates that the animal has been purchased by an individual. It's not going to be retail sold at a grocery store or a restaurant. It is being purchased by that individual to consume with their family, their friends, and their on-farm guests. Beyond that, the kill is being done at our business on the farm, and it is going to be slaughtered in a means that meets the religious needs of the customer. So introducing you to a few of the communities with which we've worked. One of the organizations that we saw a lot was from the Orthodox Church in our area. The Orthodox Christian community is largely from East Africa, Ethiopia, Eritrea, places of that nature. They have a cultural slaughter preference, although it is not a component of the Christian community that it must be killed by a Christian to be consumed. Culturally, they want to know that the animal has been slaughtered by a Christian and that the preparation technique matches that need. In the community, often meat is going to be cooked up, served with injera, which is a flatbread, vegetables, cheeses to be enjoyed. Now, it's very traditional that in this community, they're looking for a call ewe. They want a nice big 180, 200, 220-pound sheep that they will actually be able to bone out. So they will end up with a big bag of meat and a big bag of bones. The bones are excellent for making the soup that they enjoy, and then the meat is going to be cooked up for a long time with peppers, spices, vegetables. So keep in mind that although as Americans we might look at call sheep as being not as desirable, to this community that's going to be their major source of protein. Call sheep can be profitable if they are marketed in the correct way. A lot of holidays are very prominent in the Orthodox community that are similar to the ones with which we are familiar in the Western community. For example, Ethiopian Christmas falls a few days after Western Christmas. Lent and Easter are terms with which we are familiar, although they do fall on different calendars. Lent is a time period of fasting for the Ethiopian community. So to give you some perspective on how that affected our business, in the Ethiopian community, fasting is done by removing animal products from the diet. So during Lent, a period of fasting, the Ethiopian and Eritrean Orthodox communities will not consume any animal product. Starting with Easter then, they celebrate. So we would have a period of time where we would not see a large component of our ethnic community customers until the celebration of Easter. Ethiopian New Year is another major holiday within this community. Ethiopian New Year falls on September 11th on an annual basis. So that is another time to target possibly selling call ewes to make a profit. Susan will move forward to the next slide to talk about another community. Keep in mind that these are communities with which I've had a lot of experience working, but wherever you are, you will have different exposure to ethnic groups. So I want to give you some of these stories and experiences so you know certain items that you can be asking those with whom you're working. They will not be specifically the same groups, but it will allow you some background on how to approach them. The picture that you'll see here is taken just outside of our barn on the Eid al-Adha a couple of years ago. The Eid al-Adha is the High Muslim holy day. We have a lot of individuals from the Muslim community in the central Ohio area, especially West African from places like Senegal, Mauritania, North African, countries such as Tunisia, Egypt, Morocco. These individuals are often looking for a finished lamb very similar to what the American consumer would like. However, it is very dependent upon price. Many of these consumers are more than willing to switch to a call sheep for the right price. So keep in mind that pricing is going to impact selection. Some of the major celebratory observances within the Muslim community include Ramadan, the Eid al-Fitr, the Eid al-Adha, and baby naming ceremonies. Now, most Americans are aware of Ramadan. That is a term of which they've heard. Ramadan is a lunar month during which the Muslim community is going to fast. The Muslim community, however, fasts in a much different way than the Ethiopian Orthodox community. So keep in mind as you work with different religious groups, when you hear terminology, you may need to investigate what it means for that specific group. During the month of Ramadan, from sun up to sundown, the Muslim community does not consume anything. Now, this does not impact children, the elderly, those that might be in ill health, but anyone who is healthy and able to do so will not consume anything. This includes water. The traditional way of determining sun up to sundown, if you could tell the difference between a white thread and a black thread, it was now sun up. When you could no longer tell the difference, it was sundown. Once the day had ended, it is a time of celebration. That is when families get together and they will have huge feasts. So they will continue to consume animal products. They simply have this prohibition during daylight hours. That being said, Ramadan changes every year because it is a lunar month. So as you're targeting good times to sell your animals, keep in mind that this holiday changes throughout the year. The Eid al-Fitr, festival of the breaking of the fast, is at the end of Ramadan. This is a time when great parties will be held to celebrate the fact that fasting has concluded. Approximately 60 days after the Eid al-Fitr is the Eid al-Adha, the festival of the sacrifice. This honors the patriarch Abraham. As you may recall from the stories, Abraham had longed for a child, but he had never had one. He was very old, as was his wife Sarah. God, however, had promised Abraham that he would be the father of many people. And in his old age, Abraham did become a father. He saw this as a great blessing from God, and therefore was going to honor the fact that God had granted him this child. Abraham, thus, was very dedicated to the boy. That being said, along the way, God commanded Abraham that he must sacrifice the child. Abraham was willing to do so. Because of his willingness, despite the fact that he did not want to, he prepared his child to be offered as a sacrifice to God. Because he was willing to follow what God demanded, the Lord saved at the last moment his son. In place of the boy, he was provided with a ram lamb to offer up as a sacrifice. And because God recognized that in fact Abraham had been so devoted to him, Abraham was blessed. To the Muslim community, this story is incredibly important because it recognizes the fact that because Abraham was faithful, God rewarded him. Thus, in the Muslim community, on the Eid al-Adha, every adult male Muslim is expected to offer a sacrifice to God. The animal of choice is a male ram lamb that would be intact because this was the animal that was provided in the story. That being said, culturally, many Muslims will apply this religious dictate in different ways. For example, a goat, a cow, even a camel can be a very popular offering. So keep in mind that this story may be interpreted in different ways with a variety of cultural groups within the Muslim community. Susan will go ahead and advance here, and we do appreciate feedback on sound as we go along. That allows us to monitor things. So please do continue to update us on that. Keeping in mind some of those different experiences as far as working with a variety of cultural groups, here's some ideas about being able to target these markets. First of all, consider all of your options. If you want to reach the ethnic consumer, there are a variety of different ways to do so. You can simply work with a stockyard, but keep in mind the calendar to be able to target popular dates. You can work direct to packer, being able to sell your animals to a slaughterhouse that is able to make sure that it meets these needs. In addition, consider direct to consumer. If you like working with people, getting to know them, you may want to establish relationships with individuals personally where you can be able to provide the animals that they need. Also, I highly encourage you to take a look at farmers markets in your area. Often farmers markets will accept EBT or WIC, Electronic Benefits Transfer, which is the appropriate name for food stamps, or WIC programs, which offer funding for women and children to be able to purchase healthy food products. Many individuals from the ethnic community utilize these benefits. Therefore, this is a good way to be able to target their spending power. Be mindful of holiday times because these can trigger higher prices, but also many other farmers could be meeting these times as well. So looking at some upcoming dates for 2014, 2015, and 2016, we were just speaking about the Muslim community celebrating Ramadan, the Eid al-Fitr, and the Eid al-Adha. You can take a look at those dates and see how they transition from year to year. Each year for the calendar that we utilize in the Western community, you can see for the lunar months it is moving up a couple of weeks. Now Western Christmas and Orthodox Christmas stay on the same date, but they are on separate dates. But then as you compare Western Easter and Orthodox Easter, both within the Christian communities, but simply in different realms, you can see how they vary. In 2014, the two Easters fall on the same date. In 2015, they're about a week apart. In 2016, they are vastly different, with an early Western Easter and a later Orthodox Easter. Ethiopian New Year, as aforementioned, always falls on September 11th, a good time to market call sheep. Passover and Hanukkah dates are listed as well. One item to keep in mind is any lunar holiday is an estimate, because the moon can actually have a different phase than originally anticipated, so do keep up to date on how it actually falls. And Susan will move on from here. Susan, we are ready for the next slide. Thank you very much. So I want to bring up another consideration as far as budgeting. The gentleman in the picture here is Mohammed Abdi, an individual who has worked for us for quite a while. He is a wonderful person, always has that big smile on his face, and you can see him here on our kill floor. Mohammed Abdi is a Somali Bantu refugee. Another facet of working with ethnic communities is getting to know the various nuances in each community. Initially, one might think that all people from Somalia are Somalis. Actually, the Bantu people are an ethnic group within the Somali national community. They are a very distinct ethnic group. They are Somalian, but they're very proud of their ethnic heritage. Mohammed Abdi receives EBT, food stamp benefits. Many diplomatic dictates can actually impact the buying power of the ethnic consumer. For example, a company that is going to offer the EBT program wants to be able to target those who can utilize it. In our case, a lot of our Somali consumers are Bantu consumers because they come from a country that is recognized by the United States as having refugees. They receive EBT. In contrast, Sudan is not recognized as a refugee state. Those individuals are recognized as immigrants. Because they are simply immigrants, they do not necessarily have that food stamp buying power. So keep in mind that even though it seems very distant to be discussing diplomatic relations with a variety of countries, that can actually come down to your ability as a farmer to utilize those food stamp benefit offerings to your customers. Another facet of Mohammed Abdi is that he is a very devout Muslim. He believes strongly in his faith, and along with that, he is the father of 10 children. Within the Muslim community, it is considered a distinct blessing by God to have a child, and therefore he is very proud of his family. He works hard as a butcher, he has another job as well, and he loves goat meat. But with all these considerations in mind, he is a typical consumer who is budget conscious. Therefore, you have to ask yourself, will someone on a tight budget continue to choose goat meat that is an expensive meat in light of increased livestock prices? Abdi enjoys chicken as well, and he is known to buy a call sheep if it is the right price. So as you are targeting these consumers, keep in mind that budget aspect. Susan will advance on. I wanted to introduce you to some terminology with which we often work at Blystone Farm. Invariably, we have a lot of phone calls where someone will ask, do you have good sheep? And I always wondered what that definition of a good sheep was. I don't think they necessarily enjoyed my humor that actually we had bad sheep, but I always enjoyed that. Keep in mind that fresh products are highly esteemed by the ethnic community. They also like to utilize words such as pure, organic, and natural. But despite their utilization of those words, the definition does not necessarily match USDA standards. The focus is on a farm-fresh, local product. But again, budgetary constraints can impact this. Even though the consumer may want a custom-processed, ritually slaughtered product that is fresh, for the right price, they will often choose an imported frozen product to be able to meet their budgetary constraints. And then they're going to stretch that protein with rice and breads to be able to meet their family's needs. Get to know your customers. Learn what these words are that are valuable to them. Understand how it impacts your business model if you are going to meet such needs. Susan will move on to the next slide. Considering some of the facets of the economics of lamb and goat production, we are mindful that in the United States we see a steady but slight increase in lamb and goat production. Likewise, a lot of Americans are recognizing that lamb and goat are very desirable proteins. Both are lean, both are very nutritious, and in our area particularly, we are seeing a growing demand for both products in the local American community. As farmers, we know that sheep and goats are easy to manage, they reproduce rapidly, but prices are going to continue to fluctuate until production nears the demand and there is a steady supply available. Because right now, especially with the ethnic community, there is a greater demand for goat and lamb than the current supply in America. That's going to drive the price up for the individuals that want that fresh, ritually slaughtered goat and lamb. But they have those budgetary constraints. Thus, the supply is supplemented by frozen product that is coming into the country and often available at a lower cost. Keep all these facets in mind as you look at your business model. How does it impact your individual farm as you're setting yourself up? Whether you're selling to a stockyard, whether you're going to be selling directly to your consumers, keep in mind how such economics will impact you. Susan will move on to the next slide. These are some things that I would really like you to keep in mind as you do any form of direct marketing. First of all, there can be difficulties in communicating. Patience and understanding go a long way. I'm often asked if, as a woman, I had difficulty working with the Muslim community, which traditionally is going to be a situation where a gentleman comes out to make the purchase for his family. In honesty, as a female, I never had that issue. The individuals who are coming to the United States recognize that they are now in a different culture, and although they would like to keep traditional ways, there is that recognition that they are in a different situation. I had incredibly pleasant experiences working with the Muslim community, as with other cultures. Get to know your customers, and that understanding can really solve any problems, even with a lack of communication abilities. Also keep in mind that different cultures do emphasize a variety of styles of purchasing. Bartering, negotiating price. I had many situations where an individual would select a sheep. I would say the price is so much, perhaps $200. They would look at me and say, okay, I will give you $180. I would emphasize, no, the price is $200. It would go back and forth. You need to decide what works best in your situation. Some farmers find that negotiating to work. For us, it was not successful because we had a specific business model which we had to address. Therefore, decide what is functional for your business and be firm with it. Continue to seek educational opportunities that are going to allow you to gain cultural understanding. Individuals who are coming to a different country are seeking the same thing about America, so make sure you're educating yourself so you can meet the needs. And again, always ask questions. As you get to know an individual to whom you're trying to sell a product, you'll learn a lot about them, what they're seeking, what they like, what they don't like. Word-of-mouth promotion is so important in the ethnic community. If they have a positive experience, for example, if Samba really likes your product, he's going to tell his neighbor Omar, and Omar is going to tell his cousin Dadaba, and now you have more customers coming to your farm. Understand, as with many ethnic communities, the Irish, the German, as they were settling in the United States, that this word-of-mouth experience was huge in being able to promote a business. Look for periodicals in your area that target these groups. They are going to welcome advertising from American businesses and farms. For our business, we reached out to the Somali Link newspaper as well as to the Ethiopian Yellow Pages. There actually is an Ethiopian Yellow Pages, and we had the pleasure of being one of the first advertisers there, which was a great way to reach our customers. I want to emphasize, as Susan did, that illegal slaughter may seem like a quick way to make money, but it is very detrimental in many ways. Not only can you set yourself up for failure, but it also impacts the entire industry. And finally, keep in mind that in working with any customer, smiles and thanks are universally appreciated. Even if you don't understand exactly what they're saying in their native language, being able to say thank you is so important to a sales transaction, and having a positive attitude is huge. Susan, we'll move on to the next slide. As we're wrapping up, there are some things there that I would simply like you to consider in any business that you're doing with your farm. This is a picture of me with my goat Mary Beth. She's one of the mascots of my farm. I believe in production, but we all recognize that there's always going to be that lamb or goat that becomes a little bit of a pet around the farm. And so that's something that as you're deciding in your farm business how you're going to work, it is good to have that animal that keeps you focused on the fun of farming, because it should be enjoyable and it should always be fun. Identify your niche that you're going to be marketing to. Make sure you're understanding your consumer. Just as you want to be understood, understand who it is that you are working with. Promote the unique quality of your product. If you raise sheep, make sure you enjoy eating lamb and you know how to cook it. Likewise with goat. If you're going to be raising goats, make sure you understand how delicious goat meat is. Set a price that's going to justify your farm production. If you want to run a hobby farm, that is absolutely fantastic. But if you want to make money, there is nothing wrong with that. Profit is not a dirty word in farming. It has to be a business. It has to be successful. Continue networking with other producers to share ideas. And be willing to step up and speak with your community about what is important with your farm, why you need what you need to be able to keep farming. The quote that is listed there is something which I truly believe. There is no enterprise as ancient and noble as the care of the earth and its creatures. Being able to farm gives us that opportunity. A successful farm business allows us to keep tapping into that wonderful experience. I am delighted to answer any questions that may be coming up. As we move to the next slide, the website for my family's business is listed. Also, you can see my cell phone number and email. Never hesitate to reach out via email to me. I am always glad to answer any questions which you may have. And Susan, at this point, I'll go ahead and wrap things up so that you can start the question portion. At this point, it looks like we will take some questions. Susan is going to keep her mic muted, and I'm glad to facilitate any questions which you may have. The picture that is shown on the screen there is actually of my brother Josh and myself. That was taken a couple of years ago. Josh is now working full-time at the slaughterhouse and is a wonderful addition to our team. It's great to work with a family business. For those of you that do, you know that it has its unique challenges, but it's a wonderful experience. First question to come up, do you have a special strategy for dealing with budget-conscious customers? Keep in mind that lamb and goat are two products which we're very proud to raise, we're very proud to process, and with that concept of profit being necessary for a business, never hesitate to set a definite price and keep it. Consumers will make different choices depending on what their buying power may be, but you should never demote the ability of your farm to make a profit. So stand firm on your pricing and make sure that it is reaching what you need. Individuals who can purchase the product will do so. Another question coming in, do you keep a customer list? How do you keep it organized? We do maintain customer lists, but for a very specific reason. Under Ohio Department of Agriculture regulations, anything that is sold under custom slaughter, we must maintain the name and address of the individual who purchases it so that the Department of Agriculture can verify that it is not going into a restaurant or a market for resale, but is going directly to a family. With that customer list, we do always inquire if they would like to add to our email list, and then we are on Facebook, so we have a variety of customers, whether American or whether from the ethnic community originally, who do follow us there. That allows us to promote our farm business and offer special incentives that are going to be promoting our farm. Another question coming in, do any ethnic groups favor hair sheep over wool? That's an excellent question, and we do actually see that quite a bit, that hair sheep are very popular with many African communities. In Africa, most sheep look more similar to what we know as hair sheep as opposed to the sheep with wool. Often we'll have customers come out and they see a katahdin or something of the like, and they comment, "That looks like an African sheep." Because they have an understanding of that animal, they typically sell very fast. Now, that is specific to the groups with which we work and the area where we are located. This can vary with different groups, so make sure again that you are speaking to your customer so you understand what it is they are looking for. For us, the hair sheep are very popular. In other situations, they may not be as much. We've made that effort to make sure we understand what it is our customer is looking for. Next question coming in deals with what happens with the hide. Is that taken as well? Our hides predominantly are going to be disposed of. That being said, from time to time we do have a customer who wants the hide for a specific reason. We've had a few gentlemen from Africa who are drum makers, so for them they wanted to end up with the hide to be able to tan and utilize in drum making. There are also individuals who like to have the meat with the hide on. This is traditional with goat meat in many West African countries, that actually the hair would be singed on and the skin would be consumed with the meat. We do not offer that service at our facility, but it is something that can be available. Again, this underscores the need to get to know what it is that your customer seeks. The following question inquires, is your farm solely a custom slaughter or a USDA slaughter facility too? As we've expanded through the years, we've added a lot of different options. When we opened, we were only custom slaughter. Therefore, everything that was going out the door was going to be consumed by an individual, his family, his non-paying guests. We then added full inspection services to our facility so that we could sell to markets and restaurants as well. Now, with a butcher shop on site, we do a great deal of retail work that is going to go out through our retail case. In any small business, you need to evaluate what is successful and what your options are for expansion. Thus, in the last 9 years, we've had many evolutions to our business as we decide what works the best and identify what is not functioning as well. This is something that is very important, whether it is a business of any type, but especially on a farm. You need to be able to identify where your successes lie and where your failures lie, and then be able to adjust the business based on that. Next question inquires, do you have clients that want you to hold animals for them and then realize that your cost is cutting into the profit? This is very true. We have had a lot of clients ask us to hold animals. For our business model, this is not successful. We have tried it in the past and we found that it did not work for us. That being said, it could be a situation where at your individual farm, you do have the capabilities to hold an animal for a time period, and you could offer a premium if an individual asks you to hold an animal. This could be an additional price that could cover your feed costs, cover any of your expenses along with it. For us, that was not something that was successful. Along with that question, it was asked about maintaining intact bucks. Most of the lambs and bucklings that we sell are going to be less than a year old. So since we keep them intact and do not castrate, it is not a huge challenge for us because we know that prior to 1 year of age, we're going to be marketing them. That being said, there could be situations where we are selling intact males that are older. For example, from time to time, we have a ram that is several years old that is no longer needed at an individual sheep farm, and so we will market it for them. Those can be interesting situations. Normally, since we're used to working with sheep, we have no problem. We simply maintain them in facilities as needed. We have had challenges, however, when we've had 2 rams at the same time that did not know each other and wanted to establish who was prominent in the situation. Keep in mind that as you're working with livestock, it's going to be a variable that you have to decide what works for your farm. If it's not successful, don't hesitate to say you won't do it. Next question, do you find goats to be as profitable as sheep from a meat processing standpoint? In my personal experience, we have had much more success profiting from our sheep. That's a situation because of the nature in which we raise the animals. The sheep are very low maintenance for us. We have pretty good layout for raising the animals. The meat goats, although they're going to have a higher price per pound on the meat, it takes a little more intensive management for us to be able to produce the goat meat. I personally enjoy raising goats. That's one of my passions. I love my sheep. I'm expanding my sheep herd as it is, but I simply love raising the goats. So that is my personal preference. But again, in every business, figure out what works for you. Next question addresses the on-farm slaughter rules for sheep farmers here in the state of Ohio. Keep in mind this varies from state to state. In Ohio, the basic rule is if it is your animal on your farm, you can process it. This is something that Susan addressed in her previous presentation. This allows that flexibility where a farmer can really raise their own food, enjoy their product. That being said, your animal, your property, you may slaughter it. Once you sell the animal to someone else, they cannot slaughter it on your farm unless it is a certified facility. Hence the impetus for my family to open one. At the time period when we opened ours, as aforementioned, we were first in the state to be licensed under those regulations. This was a time period where the ethnic community was growing in the state of Ohio, and the legislature recognized that certain rules were needed not only to provide for that opportunity, but to make sure it was a healthy meat product that was not adulterated. Hence, we wanted to be responsive to Ohio Revised Code to make sure we were meeting those rules. In every state, however, this varies, so make sure that you are taking the time to investigate what is legitimate in your state. For example, in Virginia, slaughter rules are very different, and there's a lot more flexibility. So keep in mind that you need to understand what your specific rules may be. Next question inquires, how many lambs do you process yearly? This is going to vary a great deal. For example, we sell a lot of lambs during the holiday season, but during Lent we will not sell nearly as many. Thus, our processing varies consistently throughout the year. Next question inquires, can you recommend a website where one can learn more about specific cultures and religions? I highly recommend a variety of extension websites as well as different university websites. Susan maintains a great one through the University of Maryland. We're having some reports of lost audio. We appreciate the feedback here. We'll continue on as we wrap up. Susan, it looks like we're getting through most of the questions, so at any time, if you want to take over, feel free. We sincerely appreciate everyone participating this evening, and we hope that this has been a beneficial opportunity. We're certainly glad to keep taking any questions. We note that there are a little bit of difficulty with the audio coming on through here. Certainly delighted to answer any more questions, but again, just wanted to offer sincere appreciation for your involvement in this program. This has been a wonderful opportunity for the states of Maine, Maryland, and Ohio to collaborate. It's a fascinating situation where we're able to actually connect throughout the country and discuss these items that impact us on our individual farms throughout the country.